I'm so thrilled that today we're going to be speaking with Rob Coldren, who's been an attorney for over 40 years. He's an expert in real estate. His specialty is working with property rights, and he's going to tell you more about it. He's sitting there right next to me on the screen, and we're just thrilled to have him. He's from Orange County as well, so that's even better. And he is actually the chief Imagineer of his law firm of Coldren Law Offices. So before we get into all the nitty-gritty of what all the wisdom you're going to share with us, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what your passion is?
Well, as you can see behind me, there's a picture of a great wave breaking. I love to surf, being from Southern California, and I love hanging out with the fam. I love practicing law. I love my particular little area, niche, which is representing people who own mobile home parks. Over 40 years, I've represented hundreds of people that own mobile home parks, and it's kind of a little niche. And I just have loved the practice of law and also being in business. I'm also a property owner and that sort of thing.
Right, it's wonderful.
I'm a married human, Mari. I have a bride of 40 years and two lovely adult kids.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm sure they're really proud of their daddy as well. So I just want people to know that they can find out more about you at our website at privacypiracy.org, but also at your website at Coldren, that's Coldren law.com. So just make sure that you can, check that out as well. So the fact that you've been in business for over 40 years in the legal profession, and you've learned all the crazy things that happen in the law, especially in real estate and property rights and all that, how is it that you kind of just keep up with all the nuances and all the cyber stuff that comes up?
Right. Well, it's interesting. Thanks for asking, Mari. First off, of course, we spoke offline before we got involved here about your continuing legal education classes that you give, some in privacy and cyber related matters. And of course, as a lawyer, we have to go through all these continuing legal education. I take those seriously, and I not only give them from time to time, but I attend them, obviously, because every 3 years we have to turn in our hours as lawyers.
Right.
I've learned by doing too. It's funny, but as a trial lawyer, every time you have a case, you have to learn everything there is to know about that client's problem and that client's business, because otherwise you're not going to be effective at solving it. And so I've had the privilege over 40 years of being able to look behind the curtain and look behind and see what goes on in businesses and find out what really makes various businesses tick. So I have a very broad exposure in that regard. I co-managed a law firm here in Orange County for about 35 years, and we had 50 workstations there. And so very familiar with IT and very familiar with trying to protect the privacy and security of my clients' files, my clients' records. It's an awesome responsibility, and I've always taken that very seriously. So I've learned by doing in that respect as well. I've listened to shows like your own, and I must say I've listened to a few of your broadcasts, and they are absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
And I'm going to put you on my list as a regular, for regular listening. And finally, I'd like to say, I think another thing that qualifies me to present today is that I'm not a techie. I am not an IT person. And as a result, I have to be able to translate, much like when you take a complex niche business like, I don't know, like mobile home parks or something.
Yeah.
And translate that for a jury, you have to find a way to make it understandable. So I find that I'm pretty good at bridging the gap between the professional, the privacy and security officer, and the human being that's sitting there with a computer problem. So that's kind of, that's a summary of how I do that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that so much, because I think it's sometimes when the experts are talking and they can't relay what they're talking about, then it's hard. And we have so many people who own businesses and that are people in high places in companies that need to know how to take care of things and also how to make it understandable for their clients and their customers and their employees. So I appreciate that. So,
Very
before we started, you were telling me about this case that I think people can really relate to the concerns for businesses when they hear about cyber attacks and what can really happen. So I know you have a case going on that we're going to keep it mum as to who they are or what are the other vendors involved. But it's so obvious that we've been seeing these kind of cyber attacks that you were talking about. We've seen it over and over, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of times. So why don't you share with us a little bit about this case that has been really a concern for one of your clients?
Yeah, and again, this is not unusual. I want to stress that there are probably hundreds or thousands of similar circumstances occurring over the past number of years.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, this is an interesting one or an instructive one because it relates to both phishing and it relates to spoofing as well. Phishing being the sending of emails with attachments or links, which then someone clicks on, and all of a sudden their computer is infected. And when it's infected in two ways. First off, it's conscripted as a slave of the bad guy, of the hacker, and they go in and find all the contacts of the user, and then they broadcast to all of those contacts a similar virus that has the opportunity to take over any computer that it can get into. And then spoofing being the basically impersonating another account or another domain or another holder. Here, this involves both. And by the way, somebody might be able to figure out what case this is because it is an ongoing case, but I want to say it doesn't matter because I'm not going to talk about anything private, privileged, confidential. I'm only going to talk about allegations here. And the other caveat I probably ought to give you is if I say anything about the law or your legal rights or your legal obligations,
it's not legal advice.
I encourage your listeners to seek out their own counsel.
Yes.
You get what you pay for, and I understand your listeners can hear this for free.
Yeah.
So blah, blah, blah. Okay?
Right.
So anyway, here's the deal. Let's say we have a mobile home park management company that manages a whole bunch of mobile home parks. So every day they're sending wires around for the purchase of mobile homes. And then there's a vendor that they're dealing with, that they're getting the home from. And then, of course, there's the manufacturer that's going to want a wire transfer before it sends the trailer into the park.
Right.
So in this case, the vendor didn't have adequate security on their own computer. In fact, they were using a Hotmail business. They were using Hotmail as their business account. I'm glad to see that you share my concern about that.
Yes.
In that they were using that Hotmail account, and they were phished successfully. And the phisher sent out then a broadcast to other folks, and one of those folks was my client. My client, of course.
Let me stop and go back for a second. So when they were phished, there was someone within the company, right, who believed it was a true email. Is that correct? We have to kind of go step by step.
Thank you. Let me back up. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's when and if we get to tips, because I always in these interviews, I like to try to leave viewers with useful information.
Yes.
Tips that if they will just employ them, they'll feel that they got their money's worth, if you will, with regard to the seminar.
Yeah.
But that's exactly right. Okay.
I want to stop you for 1 second because, I get tons of phishing emails, but I know to just delete those. I know that, and I don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And so that's about training your employees.
That's what I was going to say. If you're if it's one thing if you know about it, but if you have, like I say, if you have 50 employees,
yes.
or in the case of a mobile home park management company, hundreds. And
yes.
many of those employees, of course, are park managers, and park managers may not have law degrees, or they may not, so without the proper training and the proper education, these people are going to risk getting your entire network
Yes.
spoofed and phished and then spoofed. In this case, our clients' computers were infected when someone clicked on a link that's in the
Body of the email. Mm-hmm.
you typically get hurt just opening an email. But but anytime someone asks you to click on a link or
Never.
open it, yeah, well, you have to do that sometime because you have to be in business. So it's not
Right.
never, but here are
But
some
to check
tips.
it out, like when I'm going to send you the MP3, it'll be a link, but you
Mhm.
know that you and I have talked about that you're going to get it. So that one you can click on.
Perfect example. Now, Marie, it's interesting. Mari, I know you. I know you now. But let's say 3 years from now, out of the blue, I get an email from you saying, Rob, I need you to advise me on the attachment. Okay. Now I think to myself, well, I know Mari. Gosh, I haven't heard from her in 3 years. Okay.
Right.
Why is she sending me this? I know nothing about it. That's the one that I quarantine, that I call you up with, that I text you with, or that I generate a new email, by the way. I don't reply to your email
Right.
because the email could be intercepted and worked on by the hacker. So that's a perfect example. Other little
That's a
things.
great tip. Yeah. Don't click on if there isn't any explanation of it either, then that is another red flag. So just like you said, call me or write an email and say, did you write me an email and ask me to look at an attachment? And obviously my answer would be no. Right.
A far more difficult way to avoid, I think, being successfully phished. A far more difficult issue is the issue of when it's an email that looks like it came from an official commercial source, from
Yes.
a bank, from Amazon, for example.
From
There are
IRS.
from the IRS. Now, you're right, Mari. These people have become unbelievably sophisticated. All right.
Yes.
And all I can tell you is some of them look, act, and feel exactly like one that you would get. That's because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to imitate it.
Right.
But frankly, you can typically tell if you really study it, there will be a problem. There will be, perhaps the watercolor is washed out. The color is washed out on a part of the email, or perhaps there's a misspelling somewhere or something like that. You need to be very careful. Another thing you need to watch out for is a domain name that looks very, very much like the official domain name of the outfit, but you'll find the biggest trick they use, I find, for example, in management company, the one we're talking about right now, they created a separate domain by changing a G to a Q. Okay.
Yes.
Now,
so when you look at it quickly, it looks like the real thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in any event, that's what I'd have to say about that.
So somebody in the company, in the vendor's company, clicked on this phishing email thinking it was a real email and a real click that they were supposed to be doing, some link, right?
Right. Now that created, in effect, a program operating within the network system that allowed that phisher to gain access to the email system, which in this case was, I think, an Exchange or an Outlook system. Once they had that control, they could do all kinds of things. So the first thing they did was they sent email and e-blast to every user in that
Your contact file.
Your contact. They simply access the contact file, created dummied up email, and send it out. And by the way, they dummy up the email beautifully. They remember now at this stage, those emails are actually coming from the user's account. Exactly. Okay. So and then they have to mask their identity, of course. So what they do is they cover their tracks by deleting items that show up in the sent folder, so that if you look in your sent folder, you won't see that you just sent an email to every single one of your contacts. And if they're really smart, they'll even go into your deleted folder or your trash folder and delete all of those too. But these people are becoming increasingly brazen and increasingly skilled at these attacks.
And that's what's so difficult, when you've got they are making more money than the people in law enforcement or the FBI. And that's a real challenge. And I remember I had Kevin Mitnick. I don't know if you remember who.
Yes.
I had him on my show a couple times. He wrote The Art of Deception and The Art of Intrusion, and he's been on.
Was he the carpet?
He was the one that was, he actually did it for fun more than money, actually. But he was able to use social engineering and get in and do the phishing and do all those things. And he talks about how he can get into any company. And of course, now he wears a white hat because he was convicted and he couldn't touch a computer for 5 years. But now he is an expert witness, and now he does his own consulting for the FBI, the CIA, NASA, everybody. But yeah, he talked about how easy it is to do it. And what's really sad is you could be, a Russian sitting at your own computer in your kitchen doing this. They're brilliant, and that's where they make their money.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And when you tell me that that they're more well-heeled and have more resources than the good guys,
yeah,
that's true, because of course what they recover in the Crimea or Russia or wherever, that's tax-free for them.
Right.
So when they get their money, it's tax-free.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I got kind of like intervening here.
Oh, that's good. You're like an appellate judge that interrupts an oral argument and then you've got to pick up where you left off.
Well, I'm just trying to add some juice to this. Okay, so go.
Oh, I appreciate it, and I love hearing your. Thank you very much for your participation in this as an interviewer. Anyway, so once he was successfully phished, once his account was broken into, once they had used the computer as a slave to then send out invitations to everyone else to become similarly phished. Once they'd done all that, they then set to work. They opened up a bank account in another jurisdiction in Georgia with a nationally recognized bank in the name of this mobile home park manufacturer. Not exactly though, of course, let's say it was a Fleetwood. So instead of Fleetwood mobile homes, it would have been Fleetwood mobile home instead of mobile home or something
make
like
it just enough to be a tiny bit different.
Exactly. Okay. Then of course the next thing that happens is using spoofing, which is basically impersonating someone else.
Identity theft. Yeah, it's business identity theft.
Exactly. They said, okay, by the way, we have to buy these mobile homes. We have to send these wire transfers out. But you know that wire transfer information that I just sent you, the manager who's in charge here? Well, guess what? That's the wrong wire information. Use the wire information that's attached here instead. So then that wire information is used, and lo and behold, $300,000 or so in an instant is gone digitally into a bank account that was opened in the name of some Nigerian or Russian. Nothing against Nigerians or Russians, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. Now, did your client get? Well, I guess they wouldn't get it. Did they get a notification from their bank that money was just transferred? Like every time there's a transfer of above $100 in my bank, I have set up the security that I immediately get a text. Do they have anything like that?
That is probably the number one tip that I would give all of your listeners, by the way. If we get to tips.
Yeah. We might as well tell them as we're going when it comes to something.
Oh, absolutely. Well, what you can do is you can on virtually all of your credit cards, virtually all of your accounts, and certainly with regard to wire transfers, you can have a protocol so that you, under no circumstances, will a wire go out without you approving it, either via telephone or via text or something like that. And the
Right.
irony is that even that's not enough. Mari, think
Right.
about this. Think about think about the circumstance of this client. He's supposed to send the wire because he wants the mobile home. He's
Right.
told where to send the wire to. He's relying on a spoofed attachment and a spoofed email, but the dollar amount is the same, right?
Right.
So unless you are very careful to check every single aspect of that wire transfer, i.e. the destination, the domain name,
Right.
and basically verify it, almost verify it routinely with the recipient of the wire directly,
Right.
it wouldn't do any good. A text from the lender saying, by the way, we just funded your we just executed your $300,000 wire, that won't do any good.
They might believe it. Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in any event, now we were fortunate here because the client was very vigilant. Client discovered the issue very, very quickly. We then set
How
about to
quickly?
one day.
Oh, okay. Because there's time periods for notifying the banks as well. Okay.
Yes, and it's a black box. Once you get into the banking system and the wire transfer
Uh,
system, banks are more closed-mouthed than lawyers. Okay, lawyers have to hold all secrets and confidences secret at all peril to themselves.
right.
Banks, I think, do that just because they really enjoy doing that. They enjoy not giving customers information. But
Right.
in any event, so we call up, we try to find out about the status of the wire. Oh no, we'll accept information, says the bank, from you, but we're not going to provide you with any information as to the status or destination or anything like that. Long story short, we were successful in stopping about half of the wire because they'd gone out as separate wires. The other half of the wire we were unable to stop, and so we've had to file suit. Now you might say, well, gosh, you're going to go get this guy. It's a clear fraud. And you're absolutely right. Liability is crystal clear. But guess what? The fellow on the other end, as you well know, is judgment proof,
Right.
foreign,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. So you can just
I mean,
whistle.
even if you use Interpol, you're probably not going to get them. Yeah. And they are covering their tracks. So it's going to be labor intensive, even if you could, in the end, you couldn't get anything from them anyway. So
Right.
really and truly, yeah, of course, you have to look at the bank and why the bank did this and what precautions they took, right?
Right. And you know what? This particular bank is a nationally known bank that's been called on the carpet over the last 3 or 4 years, as we also spoke about offline, for opening up tens of thousands of accounts without knowing who their customers were and what their accounts were. Guess
Right.
what? That's illegal. You
Right.
can't. The banks are subject to all kinds of anti-terrorism laws, FINRA, know thy customer, all that
Right.
stuff. They have
Right.
an obligation to know who's opening up these accounts. So
Right.
of course we're going to the bank as one of the potentially responsible persons here. And they hopefully will have enough money left after they solve all their other problems to pay my client. So we're going after the bank. We're going after,
And that
remember,
bank, as long as he notified them within a day, he should have gotten all that money back. He should have gotten all that money back. They're probably blaming him for the phishing, but there's security measures that they're supposed to be taking as well before they transfer the money.
I can tell you, I'm probably taking liberties with the facts of the case. So, and I'm doing that to simplify things for the audience.
But
So,
people need to know about how they are going when they're in business and they have business accounts and other people are working for them and working on these wire transfers. They need to set up the most stringent checks and security measures so that this can't happen. You're in real estate, so this was happening a lot in escrow. People would buy buildings or they buy homes, and then the last minute someone would call and say, oh, they tell the escrow company to change the instructions, right? And so that was happening. So now you have to double check anytime you go into escrow, because that was happening just, you know, hundreds and hundreds of times last year that I heard about.
Right. So the potential exposure here, even though liability is clear, you're not going to get it from the main bad actor. You're going to get it from the bank. But if the bank decides to put up a fight, you're going to find yourself paying lawyers many, many thousands of dollars
Right.
to unravel the thing. You know, even though I know you're a lawyer yourself, Mari, I hope you don't mind my saying that lawyers can't turn around these days for less than thousands and
Well,
thousands.
that's why I mediate.
Oh, good.
Keep
That's
people
right.
out of court as much as possible, right? So that they can settle these kinds of things.
I agree with you. Alternative dispute resolution is the name of the game and the way to go.
Yeah.
In any event, so that would be one potential target where we can get our recovery. Also, in this case, the bank, we have now through discovery and through other means been able to identify that this bank actually got a warning that the wire transfer was fishy, that the wire transfer was wrong.
And they didn't do anything.
Yeah, even before we notified the bank, their own internal wire practices flag this because they have these algorithms that they use that flag these things.
So they knew there was something fishy, and they should have verified right away.
They should have proactively done that.
Yeah.
So
Would you believe that we are out of time? Oh my gosh, we could have talked about this.
You asked me to write down 12 questions, Marley.
I know, but it was just so interesting, this case. So, you know, I know. But we got through a lot of them, though, because you are talking about some of the issues that were so important to us. So before we get off, we have just a minute or so. Do you want to just give a couple tips? And, you know, then we'll have to have you back after the whole case is done and we'll know what's going on. But can you just give a couple of the most important tips that you think my audience should be aware of?
I'll give you some of my secret tips to your audience, and in hopes that you will have me back on the show. First, as I say, just remember the account information, and never give your account information, passwords, or certainly not your credit card or something like that to someone else. Use a password protection program. I use one called, I think it's 1Password, but there's iPassword.
I use LastPass, yeah.
And LastPass is wonderful, but use a password protection program. Never open an email that looks suspicious, as we've talked about earlier today. And by open, what I mean is, I don't mean open the email. You can't hurt yourself just opening the email. Be careful about the link and the attachment that's in the email. Those are the two things.
Yep.
Ask the sender if the email does look suspicious.
Call them up on the phone or use a new email. You know, I think calling on the phone is the best because somebody could have just hacked all of their emails. So it goes back to the bad guy. So yeah.
Use good virus protection. Again, I don't get a kickback for any of this, but I use an outfit called Malware Bytes. But you know, McAfee, any of these people are good companies and can do a good job.
Right.
But it's not enough to just install it on your computer. You have to run it every so often, and you have to check to make sure that it's running every so often.
Yes.
Have a great backup system. If I was ever going to tell you to check anything, it is check your backup system periodically. Don't just keep one backup going back a week. Keep them going back a week, a month, a couple of months, a few months. Because you know what you're going to find? You're going to find that you discover that someone's hacked your system, taken your documents or something, and they did it 3 weeks ago and you just discovered it. Well, you better have a backup that goes back before then.
Right. Well, we got to go, but we will definitely keep in touch and have you back again. So Rob, I want you to give your website and then it's time to go.
Awesome. My website, Coldren, Coldren at coldrenlawoffices.com is my email. And my website, just Google Robert S. Coldren and you'll come up with more than you ever wanted to know.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.